The lunch rush had finally settled at Honeywell Eats, Richmond's warm corner cafe where families gathered after school and workers grabbed quick meals before heading home. Imani was wiping down the counter, curls tucked loosely behind her ear, when the bell over the front door chimed. She didn't look up at first. She didn't expect her past to walk in. But Sienna did. The 4-year-old sat in her favorite booth near the window, legs swinging under the table, a crayon still stuck between her fingers. She glanced at the door with the casual curiosity of a child who enjoyed watching strangers come and go. Until she froze. The man who stepped in carried the quiet confidence of someone used to space making room for him. His navy suit, the tailored cut, the watch, none of that mattered to the little girl staring at him. It was his face. More specifically, the small dimple on his left cheek, the same one she saw in the mirror every morning. Sienna blinked once, twice. Then she slid out of her seat, walked toward the counter where Imani still worked, and tugged gently on her mother's apron. "Mommy," she whispered. "Yes, baby?" Imani asked, not yet seeing who stood near the doorway. Sienna pointed with the innocence of a child who hadn't learned the weight of her words. "Mommy, why does that man look like me?" The crayon slipped from Imani's hand. Her breath caught, her body stilled. For a brief moment, the world around her dimmed into a slow, quiet pause. A pause that only happens right before a life changes direction. She turned. Her eyes landed on the man standing just inside the doorway. The same man she once loved so deeply she could feel him in her heartbeat. The same man who walked away 5 years ago without looking back. The same man who never knew she carried his child. Weston Hale. His eyes locked onto hers instantly. Shock, recognition, guilt. All of it flashed across his expression, raw and unfiltered. If anyone else had been in the cafe, she wouldn't have noticed them. But the room had gone still in that strange, heavy way, where even the sound of someone stirring a cup seemed too loud. Imani couldn't move. But Weston did, slowly, as if stepping toward her might break whatever fragile thread held this moment together. He didn't speak. He couldn't, because the little girl standing beside Imani, the little girl with soft brown skin and curls bouncing gently around her cheeks, the little girl who had just asked a question meant for him, looked exactly like him at her age. Same eyes, same cheekbones, same dimple. He felt something thump hard inside his chest, sharp, unfamiliar, overwhelming. His heart wasn't beating. It was pleading. A grown billionaire, praised in business articles, photographed on stages, celebrated for his control, found himself unable to breathe in a modest Richmond cafe because a child's single sentence had undone everything he thought he knew. Sienna tilted her head, studying him the way children study butterflies, curious, cautious, sincere. "Mommy, who is he?" she asked again, her voice a little louder this time. Imani swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled around the towel she held, though she tried to hide it at her side. She wasn't ready, never prepared, for this collision between past and present. She had rehearsed conversations in her mind for years, but none of them started like this. Weston's lips parted. No sound formed. The moment pressed down on him like truth refusing to wait any longer. Imani gently touched Sienna's shoulder, voice soft but firm. "Baby, head back to your booth for a minute, okay? Mommy needs a moment." Sienna nodded and trotted back, unaware she had just cracked the silence of 5 long years. As soon as she turned her back, Imani finally let herself breathe fully, though her chest rose and fell unevenly. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what Weston would say. She only knew something irreversible had just begun. Weston tried again to speak. "Imani," he whispered, almost afraid the sound of her name would break the moment in two. Her eyes lifted to his, guarded but filled with shock she couldn't mask. This was not a reunion. This was not nostalgia. This was not a second chance. Not yet. This was a reckoning. And the man standing in front of her felt every ounce of it. She didn't answer him, not verbally, but the way her eyes softened, just a fraction, told him she already knew what he was thinking. That child. She looks like me. She looks exactly like me. The realization hit him so hard, he nearly stepped back. In one breath, in one question spoken by a 4-year-old girl, Weston Hale understood the truth he never saw coming. His past wasn't gone. His past had a heartbeat. His past had a name. His past had curls, a coloring book, and a dimple that matched his. And she had just asked why he looked like her. The moment stretched between Imani and Weston like an open doorway neither of them had walked through in years. The cafe was quiet, but the weight in the air was unmistakable. Even someone passing by outside would have felt something shift. And Bestie, this is where you, the viewer, step in. Because before this story carries you forward, there's something I need to ask. Something that reaches beyond the cafe walls and into your own life. Have you ever loved someone who walked away before they truly understood your worth? Maybe you poured your time, your strength, your loyalty into someone who wasn't ready to hold it. Maybe you stood in silence while they chose fear over courage. Maybe you carried the pieces alone while they kept walking, not realizing they were leaving behind the one person who would have changed everything for them. Or maybe you're like Weston, someone who didn't realize what they lost until it stood right in front of them again. A lot of us know that sting, the sting of being left, the sting of leaving, the sting of timing that wasn't kind. So let me ask you another question. Have you ever had life circle back to you, years later, with something you never expected, something that forced you to face what you ran from? Because that's what's happening here. While Weston stood frozen in Honeywell Eats, staring at a child who shared his features, viewers like you might feel a familiar pull. The pull of memories you tried to bury. The pull of mistakes you hoped time would erase. The pull of someone you cared for deeply, even when you didn't show it. Stories like this work because they remind us of something real. Everyone has a chapter they wish they could rewrite. But here's where it gets deeper. What do you do when your past doesn't come back quietly? What do you do when it comes back with wide eyes, small hands, and a voice asking the question you avoided for years? Imani stood behind that counter with a strength only a mother carrying years of responsibility can understand. She wasn't just facing an old love. She was facing a decision she hoped she'd never have to make. What do you let back into your life when you've worked so hard to protect your peace? And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've had to rebuild after disappointment. Maybe you've had to become stronger because someone failed you. Maybe you had to choose yourself, even when your heart wanted to choose them. Let me whisper this truth to you, Bestie. Walking away can hurt. Walking back can hurt even more. But the silence between two people who once cared, that silence can carry years of questions. Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't I stay? Do we deserve another chance? Is it already too late? And here's the part that hits hardest. Someone always pays for silence. Sometimes it's you. Sometimes it's them. Sometimes it's the child who didn't ask to be part of the history. That's where our story begins, not just with shock, but with the deepest human truth. We are all shaped by the people who enter our lives, and the ones who walk out. So to every viewer watching this from your living room, your bed, your car, or your office, I want you to feel this moment with Imani. Her heart wasn't surprised to see him. Her heart was surprised that she still felt something, and I want you to feel this moment with Weston. His world didn't crumble because he saw an old love. His world crumbled because he saw the piece of his life he never knew existed. And now, a question for you. What would you do if the person who hurt you once stepped back into your life needing grace? Would you let them close? Would you listen? Would you forgive? Or would you walk away to protect everything you rebuilt? Hold on to that thought, because every decision Imani makes from this point forward will challenge her strength, her boundaries, her healing, and her heart. And now that I've brought you into her shoes, into her world, into her dilemma, we can ask the next big question this story is built on. When love returns after years of silence, is it a second chance? Or a second heartbreak? That's what you're about to discover. The cafe's soft hum returned slowly, but nothing inside Imani felt steady. She stood there with her hand braced on the counter, watching Weston in disbelief, his shoulders tense, his breath uneven, his eyes glued to the small girl who held the truth he never knew existed. But you, the viewer, need to understand why this moment feels so heavy. Why? This one question from a child is enough to crack open two grown hearts. Let's pull back the curtain for just a moment. Weston didn't leave because he stopped loving her. He left because he was told that choosing Imani would cost him everything his family built. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But he wasn't strong enough to resist the pressure. His life back then was shaped by family expectations, wealth that came with rules, a future already written for him. When he walked away, he convinced himself it was temporary, just time to get things under control. But time kept moving. Distance grew. And he never came back, not because he didn't care, but because shame grew louder than courage. Meanwhile, Imani faced a different truth entirely. She was alone, no partner, no apology, no closure. She had a baby growing inside her, bills on the counter, and a heart that had to mend itself without the man who once promised softness. Her story wasn't built on private jets or business deals. Her story was built on late-night feedings, early morning shifts, folding laundry half asleep, learning how to stretch money, showing up for a little girl who depended on her. She didn't have time to chase a man who had already chosen a different life. So while Weston was rising in boardrooms, Imani was rising in real life. And the hardest part? He never knew she was pregnant, not because she wanted to punish him, not because she wanted to hide anything, but because she remembered the look in his eyes the night he chose his family's comfort over their love, the look of a man drowning. She refused to hand him an anchor that would pull him deeper. So she carried the truth alone, stubborn, strong, proud, and determined to protect her daughter from disappointment. And now, here they stood. A father who never realized his absence. A mother who learned to rely on no one. And a little girl who saw similarities neither adult was ready to face. That is the real conflict, not jealousy, not old arguments, not bitterness. The problem is the consequence. A man facing the weight of years he cannot rewind. A woman facing the return of the one person who can shake her world. A child asking questions neither parent is prepared to answer. So ask yourself this, bestie. What happens when someone returns to a life that moved on without them? Because Weston didn't just walk back into a cafe. He walked into a world he abandoned without knowing. A daughter with his smile. A mother who built strength from heartbreak. A life that continued without him. He can't pretend nothing happened. He can't apologize and erase time. He can't buy his way into a family that learned to stand without him. And Imani? She isn't angry. She's cautious. Her heart remembers how he held her, but her mind remembers how he left her. Her biggest fear is not facing Weston. It's letting him near Sienna and watching them bond, only for him to disappear again. Because this time, the risk isn't her heart. It's her daughter's. And as the viewer, I want you to feel this tension. This is not just a reunion. This is a confrontation between past choices and present truths. Weston is staring at the life he didn't know he had. Imani is staring at the man she didn't think she would ever see again. Sienna is staring at someone who feels strangely familiar but doesn't understand why. This is where the stakes live. This is where the story begins its climb. A man facing his consequence. A mother protecting her child. A little girl caught between curiosity and connection. And all three of them standing in the same room for the first time. Because no matter how far you run from your past, life has a way of putting you right back in front of what you left behind. And now, this cafe in Richmond holds the moment that will test forgiveness, strength, courage, and whether broken love can ever be rebuilt. This is the heart of the problem, bestie. And it's only getting deeper from here. The room had settled into an uneasy quiet, but inside Weston and Imani's chests, everything was loud. Every heartbeat, every breath, every unanswered question, all of it stacked between them like a wall neither one knew how to climb yet. But before the story pushes forward, bestie, let me ask you, the viewer, something important. What would you do if the person who walked away from you returned holding the truth you never planned to share? Would you open the door, even a little? Would you shut it completely? Would you battle with yourself the way Imani is battling right now? Because she isn't just staring at a man. She's staring at a choice that could rewrite everything she has spent years building. And Weston? He isn't just stunned. He's confronted with something that shakes the ground beneath him. A child who looks like him. A child he never held. A child he never knew existed. So the real questions, the ones pulling this entire story forward, begin right here. Will Weston fight for Sienna? It's one thing to love a child by blood. It's another to show up for them after years of absence. Sienna won't understand his mistakes. She won't care about business deals or family pressure. She will care about consistency, gentleness, safety. Will Weston stand tall when responsibility hits him harder than any deal he's ever signed? Or will fear, old familiar fear, chase him again? Can Imani ever trust him again? A woman's heart holds history. Every sacrifice, every tear, Every moment she had to be strong because someone else wasn't. Imani learned how to raise her daughter without Weston's help, without his apology, without his presence. So now the question hangs heavy. Can a heart that learned to survive alone open again, without risking everything? Because letting Weston close isn't just about romance. It's about security. It's about stability. It's about protecting Sienna from the pain she worked tirelessly to guard her from. What happens when love returns years too late? Does it break all over again? Does it heal? Does it change shape? Does it begin anew? Timing shapes relationships more than people realize. Sometimes two people love each other deeply, but not at the same time. So what happens now that Weston is ready, but Imani carries the scars of when he wasn't? What happens when a billionaire with the world at his feet stands in front of a woman who had to rebuild her world from scratch? What happens when someone who walked away comes back wanting a second chance, but the first chance still has consequences? The entire story asks one question. Can the past be forgiven when it left behind a child who deserves the truth? Because this isn't only about an old love resurfacing. This is about a father discovering the most important person in his life, a mother protecting the heart she created, a little girl who simply wants answers. And now, bestie, this is the moment where curiosity meets emotion, where questions meet tension, where viewers lean forward because they need to know what comes next. Stay with me, because the answers are coming, slowly, painfully, beautifully. And every single one of them begins with the moment Weston realizes the truth staring back at him. For several long seconds, Weston couldn't move. It was as if the floor beneath him stopped existing, leaving only the sharp realization filling his chest. His eyes stayed locked on Sienna, who had returned to her booth and was coloring again, completely unaware of the storm she had started. That little girl, that innocent face, that familiar smile. Every detail pulled Weston deeper into a truth he was not prepared for. He stepped forward without thinking, then stopped himself mid-motion, gripping the back of a nearby chair for balance. His breath shook. His pulse pounded in his ears. He reached up slowly and touched the dimple in his own cheek, the same one he saw in hers. It hit him so suddenly, so forcefully, that it felt like something inside him cracked open. He wasn't looking at a stranger's child. He was looking at his daughter. A child he never held. A child he never named. A child whose first words, first steps, first milestones, he had missed all of them. The air in the cafe thickened around him as the truth sank deeper, pulling memory and regret into one painful collision. His voice escaped him in a whisper he couldn't control. My God. Imani watched him with guarded eyes, but even she couldn't hide the flicker of pain crossing her expression. She'd imagined this moment countless times, but the real thing felt heavier, sharper, more vulnerable than anything she prepared herself for. Weston looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything she had carried alone. The nights she worried about rent, the mornings she braided curls with tired hands, the appointments she attended without support, the celebrations she cheered for alone, the tears she wiped from small cheeks without another parent to lean on. For the first time, Weston understood the magnitude of the life he walked away from, not intentionally, but still painfully real. He had abandoned more than a relationship. He had abandoned years, years he could never reclaim. He felt his knees weaken, and he lowered himself into a chair before his body betrayed him. His hands trembled against the table. His vision blurred at the edges. This was not regret. This was heartbreak, not over losing Imani. He'd lived with that ache for years. This was heartbreak over losing time. Sienna looked up right then, holding a half-colored drawing of a cat. She smiled at him, a simple smile, a bright smile, a smile with his dimple. Weston pressed a shaking hand to his chest, as if that small gesture had physically struck him. Because it had. The realization slammed into him fully, without mercy. This child has your smile. This child has your eyes. This child has your blood. This child has your heartbeat. He stared at her as a wave of emotion swept over him, so powerful he couldn't disguise the tears filling his eyes. Imani saw it. He wasn't crying because he felt betrayed. He wasn't crying because he was angry. He wasn't crying because he felt tricked. He was crying because he finally understood what he had lost, and what he had unknowingly left Imani to carry. His voice cracked when he spoke again. Imani. He couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't have the words. His throat tightened, his breath uneven, his chest aching with a weight he didn't know how to hold. Imani stepped closer, her hand hovering as if she wanted to steady him but didn't trust herself to touch him. She saw the moment he broke. She saw the moment he realized. She saw the moment everything he built, every dollar, every title, every achievement, meant absolutely nothing compared to the small child humming quietly across the room. That's the moment, bestie. That's the moment that locks every viewer in place. Weston Hale, billionaire, deal maker, world traveler, public success, was undone by a 4-year-old girl coloring in a booth. Not by business failure, not by scandal, not by loss of wealth, by truth, by innocence, by blood he didn't know he had, by the simple shock of seeing himself in someone he never met. His hand covered his mouth as he tried to breathe through the emotions storming inside him. Time didn't pause. He did, because nothing in his life, not money, not power, not status, had ever hit him this hard. He wasn't just looking at a child. He was looking at his child. Everything else inside him fell silent. Everything else in the room faded, because this, right here, right now, was the moment Weston Hale's entire life shifted, the moment he realized there was a part of him living in the world without his knowledge, and he had just looked her in the eyes for the very first time. Weston's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. His world had already tilted once, but nothing prepared him for what was about to happen next. Imani stepped forward, not with anger, not with softness, but with the weight of someone who had carried truth alone for far too long. Her fingers tightened slightly on the counter as she watched Weston struggle to steady himself. He opened his mouth, voice barely a whisper. "Imani, is she?" The question hung there, bare, raw, heavy enough to fill the room. Imani looked at him, really looked. She saw the remorse in his eyes, the shock, the grief over lost time, the fear of the unknown, the realization that had hit him harder than any loss or victory he'd faced in his carefully constructed world. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself, because once she spoke these words, nothing would ever be the same again. Her voice came out quiet, steady, and heartbreakingly firm. "Yes, Weston." His breath caught, but she wasn't done. Imani held his gaze, not wavering, not softening, not hiding. "She's yours." The words dropped between them like a stone in still water, sending waves through both of them that neither was prepared for. Weston didn't blink, couldn't blink. His hands braced on the edge of the table. His jaw trembled. His entire posture buckled beneath the weight of a truth he should have known years ago. "Mine?" he choked out, barely audible. Imani nodded once, not with regret, not with shame, simply with truth. A truth she kept quiet for years because she had no choice but to survive without him. Weston's knees weakened, and for a moment he looked like he might fold right there. A billionaire with every luxury at his fingertips, brought to the edge of collapse by a 4-year-old girl and a sentence he never imagined hearing. He whispered again, voice shaking. "She's my daughter." Imani's eyes softened, the way someone's eyes soften when history meets reality. Yes. Everything inside him fell open. Weston reached up toward his chest again, fingers trembling as they pressed into the fabric of his suit. His breath hitched on the way out. His eyes filled until vision blurred. He bowed his head, not from shame but from a tidal wave of emotion too strong to stand tall beneath. Imani watched him, her throat tightening. She had imagined this moment so many times, sometimes with anger, sometimes with fear, sometimes with curiosity, but never with this level of raw heartbreak. Weston looked up again finally, tears slipping down his face without hesitation, without restraint, without pride. "I have a daughter," he whispered, voice breaking on every word. I have a daughter, and I didn't know. I didn't know." It wasn't accusation. It wasn't blame. It was grief. Pure grief over lost years. He covered his face with both hands, shoulders shaking with breaths he couldn't regulate. Imani felt her defenses falter, not enough to step forward, but enough that her eyes softened in genuine ache. She didn't owe him comfort. She didn't owe him reassurance. She didn't owe him anything except truth. And she had finally given it. Weston forced himself to look at her again. Every layer of the polished CEO, confidence, composure, authority, fell off him like loose threads. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, barely able to speak. Why? Why didn't I know? Why wasn't I there for her? For you? Why? Imani held her breath, then released it slowly. We'll talk, she said softly. But not here. Not with her watching. She nodded toward Sienna, who was now humming while coloring, unaware she had turned 2 lives upside down. Weston stared at the child again, and something shifted in his expression. Not shock, not fear, not confusion. Something deeper. Recognition. Connection. A pull he couldn't explain even if he tried. His voice cracked one more time. She's really mine? Imani swallowed, then said it again, quiet but certain. Yes, she's yours, Weston. The truth settled in fully. He nearly sank into the chair behind him. A grown man, wealthy, respected, photographed, praised, reduced to trembling hands and a heart too full to contain, because the love of his life had raised his daughter alone, because he missed her first laugh, her first steps, her first words, her entire world up to now, and because now he was staring at her for the first time. No money, no title, no reputation had ever broken him this deeply, but this truth did. This truth reshaped him on the spot. A truth spoken by a woman he once loved. A truth wrapped in curls and innocence. A truth he would spend the rest of the story fighting for. The cafe had fallen into a quiet rhythm again, but inside Weston and Imani, nothing was still. Sienna hummed softly from her booth, feet swinging rhythmically, unaware that her innocent question had changed the course of 3 lives. Imani stood with her hand resting lightly on the counter, strength in her posture, but emotion lingering behind her eyes. Weston remained seated, shoulders tense, breathing uneven. A man with power, wealth, and the world at his command, held in place by a truth he never saw coming. And bestie, before we continue with the rest of this journey, let me speak directly to you. Stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reflections of the choices we make, the love we lose, and the healing we hope to find. If you're watching right now, take a moment to breathe with this story, because whether you relate to Imani's strength, Weston's regret, or Sienna's innocence, something in this moment touches a place inside all of us. So before we dive deeper, I want to ask you something small that makes a big difference. Please take a second to like this video. It truly helps more people find these stories. And if you're new here, or you've been watching without joining the family yet, bestie, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you never miss these modern American love stories. We tell stories that heal, teach, uplift, and make you feel something real. Now, I have a question for you. Yes, you. Have you ever faced someone who hurt you in the past, only to realize you weren't done with your story yet? Drop your answer in the comments. Your perspective might comfort someone else watching. Now let's lean back into the story. Because the moment Imani spoke the truth, yes, Weston, she's yours, it didn't just break him. It opened a door neither of them expected to face again. Weston isn't just dealing with an old love. He's facing the responsibility of a lifetime. And Imani isn't just protecting herself. She's protecting her daughter from the possibility of loss. And the rest of this story, it's going to test forgiveness, patience, courage, and the fragile hope that second chances can still bloom after heartbreak. So stay with me, bestie. This journey is deep, emotional, and worth every moment. Now that the truth is out in the open, the real story begins. Richmond's East Side held a rhythm of its own. Saturday block parties, church parking lots filled, with laughter after service, neighbors who looked out for each other without being asked. When Imani moved back home after Weston walked away, she didn't return with shame. She returned with determination, and her community wrapped around her the way black neighborhoods often do, quietly, firmly, and without question. The day she told her mother she was expecting, the house smelled like cornbread cooling on the counter. Latrice didn't ask where the father was, not at first. She simply pulled her daughter into a hug and whispered, "You're not alone. We've got you." And they did. Her aunties came with advice and casseroles. Her cousins came with jokes to ease the weight. Her neighbors checked in without prying, offering rides to appointments or dropping off hand-me-downs. When the baby shower came around, the fellowship hall overflowed with warmth. No expensive decorations, no fancy displays, just love, steady, bold, and louder than any silence Weston had left behind. After Sienna was born, church sisters took shifts watching her when Imani needed sleep. Her mother walked the baby at night so Imani could rest her aching back. Even the teenagers on the block looked after her stroller while she carried groceries. Every step of motherhood that should have felt lonely never fully did. She had people. She had arms that held her up. She had a village. But even surrounded by support, she still carried certain moments alone. Late nights when the apartment was quiet and the only sound was Sienna's breath in the crib beside her bed. Those were the moments Imani stared at the ceiling and wondered how she was going to build a future strong enough for the both of them. Her community kept her standing. Her daughter kept her moving. And with each month that passed, she realized that leaving the past behind wasn't weakness, it was survival. Motherhood and ambition often walked in opposite directions, but Imani learned to guide them in the same lane. She worked long days at 2 jobs, morning shifts at a bakery and evening shifts at a cafe. Her apron pockets often held receipts, pacifiers, and scribbled notes about recipes she wanted to try someday. Money was tight. Sleep was scarce, but purpose kept her steady. By the time Sienna turned 2, Imani had saved enough to rent a small commercial kitchen space. She remembered her grandmother, Honeywell, whose hands made meals that brought the whole family running. Naming the cafe after her wasn't just sentimental, it was grounding. Honeywell Eats began as a dream scribbled in notebooks, brainstormed during nap times, and fueled by moments of stubborn courage. The grand opening took place on an ordinary Thursday. No ribbon-cutting ceremony. No fancy announcements. Just Imani, her mother, and a few neighbors who believed in her. At first, business was slow, but word of mouth spread. People came for the food, but they returned for the warmth. She built menus from scratch, shrimp and grits that tasted like home. Waffles crisp just right, biscuits that melted on the tongue. Her recipes carried pieces of her childhood, pieces of her grandmother, pieces of the life she built without Weston. Her struggle became her foundation. Her triumph became her daughter's security. And through it all, she raised Sienna with a love solid enough to protect her from every disappointment the world might bring. Sienna grew up hearing affirmations every morning. You are loved. You are enough. You are bright. You belong anywhere you choose to be. Imani made sure her daughter felt roots and wings at the same time. She didn't hide the challenges they faced, but she never let Sienna feel the weight of them. And despite exhaustion, despite fear, despite the ache that sometimes surfaced late at night, Imani showed up every day, not just as a mother, not just as a business owner, but as a woman who refused to let heartbreak define her future. When Weston left Richmond, he didn't return to comfort. He returned to obligation wrapped in privilege. He stepped into boardroom internships arranged by his family, dinners with investors, and meetings where success was calculated, not felt. He worked until exhaustion blurred one day into the next. Deals piled up. Promotions came quickly. By 32, he co-founded a tech investment firm that scaled with remarkable speed. Business magazines called him strategic, forward-thinking, unstoppable. But success can crowd a life without filling it. He filled calendars, not connections. He filled his penthouse with furniture, not warmth. He filled reports with numbers, not meaning. In public, he looked polished. In private, he felt hollow. He had everything but rest, everything but peace, everything but the one thing he gave up 5 years earlier. Imani's laughter used to quiet the noise in his head. Now the noise never stopped. The more successful he became, the less he felt grounded. And while his world celebrated him, none of it reached the part of him he kept locked away, the part that remembered warm. Summer nights in Richmond, the smell of coffee from the cafe where she worked, the softness of her voice saying his name. He tried to forget. He tried to bury the memory. But success couldn't compete with regret. Wealth attracted attention, and Weston dated often, but nothing lasted. Every woman he met fit perfectly into the world his family approved of, yet none of them felt right. Conversations were shallow, dinners were routine, smiles were polite, no spark, no depth, no ease, because every time he laughed with someone new, something in him remembered. The way Imani used to tilt her head when she teased him. Every time someone touched his arm, he remembered the warmth of her fingers brushing his wrist as she handed him coffee. He compared without meaning to. He withdrew without knowing how to stop. He sabotaged every attempt without understanding why. His relationships failed for one reason. He never healed from losing the person who understood him before he wore a suit and made headlines. And late at night, when his penthouse echoed, guilt whispered in the quiet. He knew he hurt Imani. He knew he let fear dictate his choices. He knew he walked away from someone who loved him without conditions. But the one truth he never knew, the existence of his daughter, would have unraveled him. He lived in success, but slept in emptiness. He functioned in routines, but breathed through regret. And underneath all the praise, Weston carried a quiet fear. What if he had walked away from the only real home he ever knew? While Weston built wealth, Imani built stability. Her home wasn't large, but it was warm, walls filled with Sienna's drawings, books on shelves, plants thriving in sunlit corners. A small table doubled as a workstation where she planned menus after Sienna's bedtime. She kept schedules taped to the fridge, reminders written in marker, and hope tucked into every routine. She built a world where love wasn't bought, it was shown. Where mornings began with hugs, where nights ended with stories read aloud, where laughter came easily because they created it themselves. Her home wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was safe. It was alive. Honeywell Eats grew steadily, and with it came something she hadn't expected: admiration from the community. People respected her work ethic, respected the quiet strength she carried. She didn't realize it, but she had become a symbol of resilience. And Sienna? She grew confident, curious, expressive, the kind of child who asked big questions and expected honest answers. Imani built more than a home. She built a foundation her daughter could stand on. Across the country in penthouses and boardrooms, Weston constructed a world that looked perfect from the outside. His days were filled with presentations, strategy sessions, and travel. His nights were filled with silence. He built a reputation as a sharp thinker. He built wealth that multiplied yearly. He built influence that stretched across industries. But none of it filled the quiet ache beneath his success. He wondered sometimes if he made the wrong choice that night in Imani's doorway. He wondered if he chose legacy over love. He wondered if he walked away from the one person who saw him before money shaped expectations. He didn't know that the missing piece in his life had a name: Sienna. A child with his dimple, his eyes, his quiet curiosity, his spark. He had an empire, but no home. Imani had a home, but no partner. Both of them moved forward. Both of them survived. Both of them grew. Yet both lived with an empty space they never fully understood, until the day fate brought them back to the same cafe. At the exact moment their daughter looked up and whispered the truth that neither of them had spoken aloud. Honeywell Eats held a comforting rhythm at mid-morning. Soft clatter from dishes, faint laughter. From a table near the window, the warm aroma of cinnamon drifting through the air. Imani wiped down the counter with steady hands, unaware that the next person who walked in would change her life in ways she mentally prepared for but never emotionally expected. Weston pushed open the door with no expectation. His mind was elsewhere, thinking about an upcoming investor call, thinking about the fatigue sitting beneath his eyes, thinking about nothing that mattered in the grand scheme of what was waiting for him inside the cafe. The bell chimed above his head. His steps slowed almost immediately. His eyes adjusted to the warm lighting. And then he saw her. Imani, the woman he once loved, the woman whose absence left a space he never filled, the woman he walked away from with promises he never kept. His breath left his chest so sharply he had to blink to make sure the moment was real. She looked different, yet exactly the same. Her curls were tied into a loose puff, her apron slightly dusted with flour, her movements graceful but tired. Maturity had shaped her face in the way time shapes people who had to grow alone. But her eyes, those soft, deep eyes, were unmistakably hers. Weston's heartbeat stumbled. His posture faltered. His mouth parted in quiet shock. He wasn't ready. He wasn't prepared. He wasn't steady. Imani froze too. The cloth in her hand slipped slightly, but she caught it before it fell. Her shoulders tensed for a second, then she grounded herself with a quiet inhale, hiding the storm flashing beneath her calm surface. She wasn't expecting him either. Not now. Not during a regular shift. Not after years of silence and rebuilding. Neither of them moved. But it wasn't the sight of Imani that made Weston's knees soften. It was the small girl sitting in a booth near the window, legs swinging happily, curls bouncing, eyebrows scrunching in concentration as she colored a picture of a cat. Sienna, a child he had never seen, a child he didn't know existed, a child whose features struck him harder than any business loss he had ever endured. He saw her eyes first, brown, warm, familiar, then the small dimple on her cheek, the same one he carried. Then her mannerisms, curiosity mixed with calm. He inhaled sharply. His breath caught in his throat. His pulse raced without control. He felt the floor shift beneath him as realization brushed the edges of his. Awareness, too overwhelming to accept fully, yet too undeniable to ignore. Time slowed around him. The cafe noise dimmed. Even his own heartbeat seemed louder than the world outside. He stood there, frozen, unknowingly stepping into the moment that would redefine every mistake, every regret, and every choice he had made since he walked away from Imani 5 years ago. Sienna didn't look up immediately. She was focused, tongue slightly poking from the corner of her mouth as she colored the ears of her drawing. She was meticulous, just like Imani, detail-oriented, careful, thoughtful. But children feel energy before they understand it. And something shifted when Weston entered. Her little head tilted. Her eyes darted toward the doorway. She blinked, studying the stranger with quiet interest. He had familiar eyes, familiar features, familiar presence. She stared openly, without hesitation. She didn't know why he pulled her attention so strongly, but she felt something important, though she didn't have the words for it. She hopped off the booth cushion and approached Imani, tugging gently at her apron. "Mommy," she whispered. "Yes, baby." Imani responded, eyes still locked on Weston, trying to steady her breath. Sienna pointed directly at Weston with the innocence of a child not yet aware of the weight her question carried. "Mommy, why does that man look like me?" The sentence hit the air like a dropped glass. A quiet shatter, a truth spoken without hesitation, a question that cut straight to the heart of the moment. Weston's eyes widened, shock moving across his face like a wave. He stared at her, at the small dimple, the tilt of her nose, the familiarity he couldn't dismiss. Sienna took a few small steps toward him, curious but cautious. She studied him the way children study butterflies, careful, observant, gentle. "What's your name?" she asked. Weston swallowed hard, bending slightly so he didn't tower over her. "Weston," he whispered, voice cracking. She smiled. "You have the same dimple as me." The world paused again. Imani's breath stilled. Weston's knees weakened. Sienna waited for an explanation she had no idea she was owed. "Do you work here?" she asked next. Her tone was innocent, sweet, unaware of the hurricane churning inside the adults around her. "No," Weston said quietly. "I just walked in." Sienna nodded thoughtfully, as if processing information with surprising depth. "You look like someone I've seen before," she added, tapping her cheek where her dimple was. Weston nearly lost his balance. Her curiosity wasn't forced. It wasn't suspicious. It was natural, instinctive, a connection she recognized even if she didn't understand. And in that moment, the truth wrapped itself around all three of them, even without being spoken fully yet. Imani's heartbeat thundered against her ribs, though her expression stayed controlled. Years as a single mother had trained her to mask panic with collected calm. But inside, everything shook. Her daughter's innocent question had struck the very fear she'd carried since the day she decided not to call Weston. Imani knew this moment could come eventually, but she didn't expect it today. Not in her cafe. Not like this. Her thoughts raced. Does he know? Does he realize? Is he ready for the truth? Can I trust him with her heart? Her hands curled around the towel she held, knuckles whitening. She stepped slightly in front of Sienna, not blocking her but positioning herself as a barrier, a protector, a mother. Her voice was gentle but firm as she whispered, "Sienna, sweetheart, go grab your drawings. Mommy needs a quick moment." Sienna nodded, skipping back toward her booth without hesitation. Only when her daughter turned away did Imani let her shoulders drop slightly. Weston took a small step forward, stopping as soon as he saw Imani tense. He opened his mouth to speak, but she lifted a hand, calm, composed, but unmistakably protective. "Not here," she said quietly, "not in front of her." Her tone carried layers. Fear of emotional chaos. Shock at seeing him again. Concern for her daughter. Memories she had pushed deep for years. She felt exposed, vulnerable, off balance, but she also felt something else, resolve. She had built a life for Sienna that wasn't shaped by disappointment. She wasn't about to let chaos enter the door without boundaries. Weston tried to steady himself. His voice came out hoarse. "Imani, She shook her head once, calm but clear. "Later," she murmured, "when she's not watching." Her brown eyes softened, Not with affection, but with a kind of weary understanding. She knew Weston was overwhelmed. She knew he was piecing things together. She knew he wasn't ready for the conversation she'd avoided for years. But she also knew she wasn't ready either. Still, she stood there, strong, steady, because that's who she learned to become. Imani guided Weston to sit at a small table near the window. She brought him water because she didn't trust her hands to serve anything more complicated. Sienna climbed back into her booth, this time sitting closer to Weston's table than before, her curiosity too strong to ignore. "So, what's your favorite food?" she asked him suddenly, swinging her legs. Weston blinked, struggling to form words. Pancakes," he managed softly. Sienna gasped. "Me too." Imani nearly dropped a napkin. Sienna continued talking, a stream of delightful childlike chatter about her drawings, her favorite cartoons, her dream of learning to bake waffles at the cafe. Weston listened to every word as if each sentence held treasure. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his phone. He didn't blink too long. He simply absorbed her voice, her expressions, her mannerisms. He watched how she scrunched her nose when she concentrated, something he did as a child. He watched how she tapped her fingers when she was excited, something he still did when deep in thought. Every second with her felt like a revelation wrapped in innocence. Imani watched in silence from behind the counter. She didn't join the conversation. Instead, she observed the softness in Weston's expression, the wonder in his eyes, the way he leaned forward to catch every word, the way Sienna warmed to him instantly. Imani wasn't naive. She knew children connected easily. But this was different. This was instinctive, natural, unforced. Sienna hadn't met many men outside family and close friends. She was polite, but not overly outgoing. But something about Weston, his gentle tone, his calm presence, the familiarity she couldn't explain, pulled her in. She shared her fries with him without hesitation. Weston looked at the tiny fry she placed on his plate as if it were a priceless offering. His voice cracked when he said, "Thank you." Imani felt her chest tighten. She never imagined seeing him like this. She never imagined seeing him sit across from their daughter. She never imagined witnessing connection forming in real time. Fear and hope tangled inside her, forming a knot she wasn't ready to untangle. The longer Weston sat there, the more the truth solidified, settling in his chest with the weight of a world he didn't know he was missing. Every detail Sienna revealed, every gesture, every smile, every curious tilt of her head, pulled him deeper into a realization that struck harder than any consequence he had ever faced. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't misinterpretation. This was connection. Real, undeniable biological connection. He remembered the softness in Imani's laugh. He remembered her grandmother's recipes she used to talk about. He remembered her telling him she wanted to open a cafe someday. He remembered nights with her that felt like belonging. And now he was sitting across from the little girl who carried his features, his spark, his quiet curiosity. The gravity hit him in waves. Guilt washed over first, sharp, immediate. I wasn't there when she learned to walk. I wasn't there the first time she said, "Mommy." I wasn't there on her birthdays. I wasn't there for anything. Love followed next, unexpected, overwhelming. It didn't arrive gradually. It hit him instantly. A love he never predicted. A love he never knew he was capable of. A love built in a single moment of recognition. Regret layered itself beneath both emotions. He regretted leaving Imani. He regretted letting fear dictate his choices. He regretted not fighting harder. He regretted losing 5 years of a life he should have been part of. Awe was the final blow. He stared at Sienna as she hummed and dipped a fry into ketchup, blissfully, unaware she had rearranged the architecture of his entire being. He reached up and touched his cheek again, the same dimple she had pointed out earlier. He breathed out shakily. "She's mine," he whispered to himself. "She's really mine." Imani stiffened at the counter when she heard the tremor in his voice. Weston wasn't a man easily shaken, but this moment had undone him completely. His posture softened, his walls fell. His entire world narrowed to one truth. He had a daughter, and he had missed everything. The last customer left just after 6. The bell chimed softly as the door closed, and the sound lingered longer than usual. It marked the moment when the cafe shifted from public space to private ground, the ground where truth would finally have to stand. Imani locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, then turned slowly toward Weston. Her apron was still tied around her waist, but her expression had changed. Her face no longer held the polite calm of a business owner. It held years she spent rebuilding herself, years filled with quiet tears and fierce triumph. Weston stood near the center table, hands clasped together like he needed something to hold on to. His suit jacket was off, tossed over the back of a chair. He looked less like the billionaire featured in magazine interviews and more like a man stripped of certainty. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Imani took a breath and swallowed the tightness in her throat. "Say what you need to say, Weston." He nodded, gathering himself. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Not with excuses, not with explanations, just, "I'm sorry." Imani didn't move. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes held a guarded ache. "You walked away," she said, her voice calm but steady. "You said you needed space because your family didn't approve. You said you couldn't risk anything that might threaten your future." She paused, fingers tightening on the edge of a table. "But you didn't come back. You didn't call. You didn't send a message. Nothing." Weston's throat tightened. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I let pressure control me. I let fear guide me. I let my father's expectations become my decisions. I'm not proud of it." Imani lifted her chin slightly. "Do you know what it felt like? The silence you left behind." He flinched. "No, not fully. But I want to." She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. It felt like being dragged underwater without warning. One minute I had someone who held my heart with care. The next minute, I had a door closing in my face. Her voice wavered, but didn't break. I had to rebuild myself from that silence, piece by piece, day by day. Weston's eyes glossed, but he forced himself to listen without interruption. "You don't get to make excuses anymore," she added. "Not today. I'm not trying to," he murmured. "Good," she said, "because I've waited 5 years to say this. Not because I needed a confrontation, but because I needed to hear my own truth out loud." She stepped closer, not out of softness, but out of strength. "You didn't just leave me, Weston. You left the future we were supposed to share. You left the possibility of something beautiful. You left a love that was real." Weston swallowed the ache swelling in his chest. "I know," he whispered. "No," she corrected gently. "You're beginning to know. There's a difference." Silence filled the room again, heavy, necessary. Weston lowered his gaze to the floor. "I hurt you," he said. "Yes," she replied. "And you didn't deserve that." "No," she whispered. "I didn't." Her honesty wasn't sharp. It wasn't vindictive. It was quiet, but powerful. The truth had finally been spoken, and Weston felt the weight of it settle deep inside him. Imani moved behind the counter and leaned against it, drawing strength from its familiar sturdiness. She'd spent years gripping that surface through stress, long nights, and early mornings. Tonight, it supported her emotionally. "When I found out I was pregnant," she began softly, "I sat on the bathroom floor for almost an hour, not because I was scared, but because I knew everything in my life had just changed." Weston looked up, eyes fixed on her, absorbing every word. "I thought about calling you," she continued. "My hand hovered over your name so many times. But I remembered the look on your face the night you left. You weren't just overwhelmed, you were drowning in expectations. I couldn't throw another weight at you." His breath shook. "I would have wanted to know," he whispered. "But you weren't ready," she answered simply. "And I wasn't going to beg a man to choose me and our child. I loved myself more than that, and I knew I had to love her more than that." She paused, letting the truth settle. There were nights when Sienna cried for hours because of colic. No one came to help. I held her until my arms went numb. There were mornings I walked to the clinic in the cold because her fever spiked and I didn't have a car. There were months when Bill scared me, but I never let her feel it. There were hospital nights when she was sick, and I sat beside her crib whispering that she wasn't alone. Weston's entire face crumpled with emotion. "And her first steps?" he asked quietly. Imani smiled faintly, though sadness brushed the edges. She took them toward the TV, trying to touch a cartoon character. I screamed so loud my mother dropped a pot in the kitchen. She laughed softly. It was beautiful. His eyes watered again, grief tearing through him. "My daughter took her first steps, and I wasn't there." "No," Imani said gently. "You weren't." He placed his hand over his chest, as if trying to ease the ache. "And her first words?" "Mama," she said proudly. But she tried to say waffle right after. It sounded like waffle. A small, shaky laugh escaped him. Of course she loves waffles. Imani continued. There were joyful days too, her laugh filling the house, her curiosity growing, her art covering the fridge. She's bright, loving, thoughtful, and everything she is came from being surrounded by people who loved her deeply. She looked directly at him, but she never had a father. Weston closed his eyes, the truth landing hard. Not cruel, not vengeful, just honest, and he let himself feel every ounce of the consequence. The cafe was quiet, only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the space. Weston swallowed hard, then looked up at Imani with eyes full of shattered understanding. You're the only thing I ever walked away from that broke me. Imani inhaled softly, her expression shifting, not forgiveness, not relief, something deeper, something that acknowledged the gravity of those words. He stepped closer, speaking slowly, choosing each word with the weight it deserved. I didn't fight for us. I let fear win. I let my father's expectations pressure me into turning my back on the one person who ever saw me before success mattered. His voice shook. I thought distance would make it easier, but every year without you felt heavier, colder. He hesitated, then whispered, and now, knowing Sienna exists, knowing I missed everything. He wiped his cheek with the back of his hand. I don't have words to describe what that feels like. Imani held onto the counter tighter. Weston continued. I would take back every business achievement, every article, every milestone, just to go back to one night, the night I walked away. I would do it differently. His honesty came with no attempt to earn sympathy. It came with raw pain. I know I don't deserve easy forgiveness. I know I don't deserve immediate trust. But I am asking. Imani stayed still, waiting. Please let me be in her life. Let me try. Let me learn. Let me show up. His voice cracked completely. I missed 5 years. I can't get them back, but I don't want to miss any more. Those words lingered. Heavy, vulnerable, true, and for the first time since he walked in, Imani's expression softened, not in romance, not in forgiveness, just human understanding. Imani straightened her shoulders. He needed to hear this clearly. If you come into her life, she began, you're stepping into mine too, and I won't allow chaos around my daughter. Weston nodded, bracing himself. First rule, she said. No gifts to buy her affection. She doesn't need fancy distractions. She needs presence and consistency. I understand, he replied. Second rule, she continued. No overwhelming her with promises. Kids take words seriously. Don't tell her something unless you mean it. He nodded again, swallowing tightly. Third rule, she said softly. You have to show up. Not when work is easy. Not when life is calm. All the time, without stepping back. I won't step back, he whispered. Fourth rule, she added, respect the rhythm of her life, her routine, her emotions. She's not a project. She's a child who feels deeply. He pressed his palm to his heart. I will respect her. Imani paused. Last rule, she said quietly. I won't protect you from the discomfort of responsibility. This is not about easing your guilt. It's about her future. Weston's voice trembled. I'm ready. Imani studied him closely. She wasn't looking for perfection. She was looking for sincerity. And she saw it. For the first time since the conversation began, Imani's shoulders relaxed. Only slightly, only enough to show a crack in her protective armor. This won't be easy, she said. I don't expect it to be, Weston replied. Then we start small, she continued. Very small. You can see her tomorrow evening for an hour. Here, in the cafe. Neutral ground. A breath of relief escaped him. Thank you, he whispered. A fragile peace settled between them. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a beginning. You should go, Imani said gently. I need to close up. He nodded, retrieving his jacket. At the door, he paused. Imani. She looked up. Thank you for raising her so beautifully. Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, she allowed the truth to show. She saved me. Weston stepped outside, the Richmond evening air cold against his face, but his heart pounding with the warmth of a new beginning. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't closure. It was the start of accountability, and he intended to honor it. The next day arrived faster than Weston expected. He spent the entire morning rehearsing what to say, what not to say, and how not to overwhelm a child he'd only just met. His driver dropped him off a block away so he could walk and calm his nerves, though nothing settled the tightness in his chest. Imani unlocked the cafe door for him at exactly 5 o'clock. Sienna sat at a corner table with a stack of books beside her, storybook collections, puzzle books, and one about animals that she insisted on reading every evening. When she looked up and saw Weston, she smiled shyly. "Hi again," she said. "Hi, Sienna," Weston replied softly. She patted the seat beside her. "You can sit here if you want." He approached slowly, lowering himself into the chair. His heart raced, not from fear, but from tenderness he didn't know how to contain. "Mommy said we can read a book," Sienna announced proudly, holding up a picture book about a mischievous raccoon. Weston took it with hands that still shook faintly. "I'd love to." He read slowly, giving each character a different voice. Sienna giggled so loudly Imani had to turn her back to hide her smile. Every laugh hit Weston deeper, opening a part of him he didn't know existed. When they finished reading, Sienna grabbed her coat. "Mommy said you can walk us to the car." Imani raised an eyebrow at the unexpected announcement, but allowed it. Outside, the evening was cool and quiet. Sienna slipped her hand into Weston's without hesitation. His breath caught. Her small fingers curled around his, fitting perfectly against his palm. He didn't look at Imani. He didn't look at the street. He looked at their hands, one large, one tiny, linking two worlds. Something inside him shifted completely. He was no longer beginning to care. He already cared. More than he expected. More than he was ready for. And as they walked toward Latrice's car, Sienna kept talking, telling stories about school, her, best friend, and how she loved pancakes more than anything in the world, even more than coloring. Weston listened to every word like it was precious. Imani watched silently, the sight doing something complicated to her heart, softening it, testing it, stretching it in ways she wasn't ready to name. When it was time for Sienna to leave, she hugged Imani tightly, then turned to Weston. She hesitated, then stepped forward, her arms wrapped around his leg in a small, awkward hug. "Goodbye, Weston," she said sweetly. "See you tomorrow?" Weston's heart swelled. He knelt slowly to her height. "Tomorrow," he promised. And this time, he meant it. Imani saw the sincerity in his eyes. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. The next few days unfolded gently. Weston arrived every afternoon at the same time, never late, never distracted. He helped Sienna with puzzles, read books, and listened to her stories with a focus that felt new even to himself. Imani watched quietly from behind the counter, noting how naturally their time flowed. But on the fourth day, something shifted. Sienna was coloring at one of the tables while Weston sat beside her, patiently helping her choose colors for a butterfly drawing. She tapped the paper with her crayon, thinking deeply in a way that made Weston smile. "Weston?" she asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart," he responded. He didn't even realize he'd used the affectionate term until it left his mouth. Sienna tilted her head, curls bobbing. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. She placed her crayon down and looked up at him with wide, searching eyes, the eyes he now recognized every time he looked in the mirror. "Why didn't you know me before?" The world seemed to stop. Weston froze, breath caught halfway, heartbeat stumbling. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. He felt the question echo through him like a bell struck hard. Imani, behind the counter, stiffened immediately. Her hand paused mid-motion. Every instinct in her tensed. Sienna blinked, waiting patiently. Weston swallowed. His eyes softened with heartbreak, but he forced himself not to look away. "I didn't know you existed, Sienna," he said gently. "If I had known, I would have been here." "From the beginning," she frowned in confusion. "How didn't you know?" "Mommy knew." His chest tightened. Imani stepped closer, prepared to intervene, but Weston gently raised a hand, asking silently for permission to answer. Imani hesitated, then nodded. Weston crouched down beside Sienna's chair, bringing himself level with her small, trusting face. "Sometimes," he began softly, "grown-ups make choices because they're scared, and sometimes those choices keep people apart who should have been together." Sienna listened closely. "I didn't know about you," he continued, "not because you weren't important, not because I didn't want to know you, but because I made a mistake long before you were born." Her eyebrows knitted. "So, if you knew, you would have been here?" His voice cracked. "Yes," he whispered, "every day. I would have held you when you were tiny. I would have watched you learn to walk. I would have taken you to the park. I would have loved you from the start." Sienna processed this with the seriousness only small children possess. She reached out and pressed a tiny hand to his cheek. "Okay," she said simply. "I know you now." Weston's vision blurred. He placed his hand gently over hers, overwhelmed by the grace of a child who forgave without needing explanations. Imani turned away quickly, eyes stinging, not from pain, but from the purity of the moment. A moment she never imagined seeing, a moment that rewrote the space between past and present. That night, after Sienna left with Latrice, Weston stayed behind in the cafe with Imani. He wasn't ready to leave. His shoulders were heavy, and his eyes were still damp around the edges. "She asked why I didn't know her," he whispered, staring at the table Sienna had been coloring on. "No question has ever broken me like that." Imani folded a dish towel, keeping her hands busy so her emotions wouldn't spill too easily. "I knew it would come someday," she said quietly. "Kids ask what sits on their hearts." Weston sat down slowly, sinking into the chair like the question had drained him. "I'll never forget the way she looked at me. She wasn't angry, she wasn't hurt, just confused, curious. She doesn't know disappointment yet," Imani replied softly. "That's why the truth hits even harder. She believes what she hears." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I missed everything," he said. "Not just moments, years, the years that mattered most." Imani looked at him, not with accusation, but with empathy she didn't plan on feeling. "You're here now," she said. "That counts for something." "It doesn't erase anything," he murmured. "It's not supposed to," she replied. Weston swallowed the lump in his throat. "When she touched my face," he said, voice cracking, "I felt something I can't describe. Like, she didn't need explanations or apologies. She just accepted me. That's how kids love," Imani whispered. "Pure, simple." He looked up at her. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," she said honestly. "But you can grow into someone who does." Those words stayed in the air between them, gentle yet powerful. And in that moment, Weston realized something even deeper. Being a father wasn't just about loving Sienna. It was about becoming the kind of man she could rely on. His first heartbreak as a father was not losing her. It was realizing how much he'd already missed, and how much he wanted to protect her from ever feeling abandoned. Days passed, and Weston continued showing up every single afternoon without fail. He didn't miss a day, not one. And Imani noticed. She noticed how he knelt to Sienna's height when speaking to her, how he listened without distraction, how he asked gentle questions, how he never rushed, how he never overstepped. He didn't bring expensive gifts. He brought time, real time. One afternoon, Sienna colored a picture of a sun with uneven rays. She proudly held it up. "Look, Weston, it's you and me." He smiled. "Why am I the sun?" "Because Mommy says the sun shows up every day." Imani froze. Weston looked stunned, and Sienna beamed proudly, unaware she'd spoken words that dissolved another piece of Imani's walls. Later that evening, after Sienna left, Weston wiped down the table they'd used, unprompted. "You don't have to do that," Imani said from behind the counter. He shrugged lightly. "I want to help." His voice held sincerity, not performance. Imani studied him quietly. "You're different," she said before she could stop herself. Weston looked up, meeting her eyes. "I had to grow. Life forced me to. But meeting her..." His voice softened. "She's changing me even more." Imani didn't respond right away. Her heart wasn't ready to leap, but it wasn't closed either. It rested in a space between caution and hope, two things she hadn't allowed to coexist in years. She exhaled slowly. "You're doing well," she said gently. Weston's expression shifted, surprised, touched, grateful. Imani walked past him toward the door, turning off the lights one by one. For the first time since he returned, she felt something unfamiliar. Not trust, not forgiveness, but possibility. A fragile one, a quiet one, but real. And sometimes, possibility is the first brick in rebuilding something worth fighting for. Weston never intended for his family to find out this soon. He wasn't hiding Sienna. He was protecting the fragile beginnings of something he was still learning to hold. But secrets like this didn't stay quiet for long, not in the Hale family. It happened during a routine family dinner at his parents' estate in Connecticut. The dining room was lined with polished wood, expensive art, and the stiff formality that Weston always found suffocating. He attended out of obligation, not desire. His mother, Eleanor Hale, noticed the shift in him immediately. "You've been distracted," she said, sliding her knife through roasted chicken with precision. "Something on your mind?" Weston stiffened. His sister, Caroline, glanced up from her wineglass. "Work?" she guessed. "No," Weston replied quietly. His father narrowed his eyes. "Then what?" Weston swallowed, debating whether he should say anything, but something inside him refused to hide Sienna, not out of pride, but out of truth. "There's someone in my life I want you to know about." The table stilled. "Who?" Eleanor asked sharply. "A child," Weston said. The fork slipped from Caroline's hand. "A child?" Eleanor whispered. "Yours?" "Yes." Silence stretched, long and cold. Eleanor's complexion paled. Thomas Hale's jaw tightened. For a moment, the entire room existed in suspension. Wealth, pride, structure, and tradition cracking together under the weight of one unexpected truth. "You have a child?" Eleanor repeated, stunned. "How is this the first time we're hearing about it?" Weston looked down, steadying himself. "I only found out recently." Another silence fell. "And then—" "Impossible," Thomas snapped. "You would have known, but he didn't." And the shock in the room cut deeper than he expected. "This must be some misunderstanding," Thomas insisted, waving a dismissive hand. "A woman trying to attach herself to our family, to our name?" Weston's stomach twisted. He knew this tone. He grew up under this tone. "No misunderstanding," he said firmly. Caroline shook her head slowly. "But you don't have relationships that serious." "Not recently." "I did," Weston answered quietly. "Years ago." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "That cafe girl?" she asked. Weston inhaled sharply. "Yes." "Imani?" His mother leaned back, stunned into disbelief. "That was years ago," she murmured. "You can't be saying—" "She's my daughter," Weston repeated. "I've met her. I've spent time with her. And she—" his voice wavered. "She looks like me." Eleanor shook her head, as though refusing the truth could erase it. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. "How could this have happened without us knowing?" Thomas scoffed. "Because she hid it." "Obviously." "No," Weston said immediately. "She didn't hide anything. I walked away. I didn't know she was pregnant." Eleanor's lips tightened. Thomas pushed his chair back. "Weston," he said slowly, "you're being manipulated." "No," Weston snapped, emotion rising. "I'm finally seeing what I've missed." But denial ran deep in his parents, deeper than love, deeper than truth. They couldn't accept this. Not because it wasn't real, but because it disrupted their world. Eleanor exhaled sharply, fingers trembling around her napkin. "Weston." She chose her next words carefully, but the care didn't hide the sting beneath them. "You need to think about the implications. This woman, Imani, comes from a very different background." Weston froze. Caroline looked away. Thomas stayed silent, but his silence was weighted, complicit. Eleanor continued. "She's not part of our circle. She doesn't share our upbringing, our networks, our world." Weston's eyes darkened. "Say what you mean, Mother." Eleanor paused, but only briefly. "Her background doesn't align with ours. Her community is not one you understand. This will complicate everything. For you, for us, for my daughter." Weston interrupted, voice sharp. Eleanor flinched. "We're only concerned about stability," she said softly. Caroline nodded. "Yes, stability." But Weston heard the undertones clearly. He grew up hearing them in whispers, in dinner parties, in invitations extended or withheld. It wasn't concern, it was coded judgment. It was prejudice dressed as caution. And it struck him differently now, because now it was aimed at Sienna, his daughter, a black child, their granddaughter. Weston felt something ignite inside him, something protective, fierce. "You haven't even met her," he said coldly. "But we know enough," Thomas replied. Weston's expression hardened. "No," he said, "you don't." For the first time in his life, he saw his parents clearly, not as authority, but as people defending their world at the expense of his child's dignity, and that clarity changed everything. Thomas leaned forward, placing his hands on the table like a judge delivering a verdict. This situation requires decisive action, he said. If the child is yours, and I'm not convinced, then she must be brought into a stable environment. Weston's jaw clenched. She is in a stable environment. Thomas ignored him. We can have our attorneys explore legal avenues. Weston stood abruptly. No. Eleanor raised her voice. If the mother is unsuitable— She is more suitable than anyone I know, Weston said. Thomas tapped the table. Emotions can't guide decisions like this. A child carrying our name must be protected properly. She is protected, Weston argued. She is loved. She is cared for. By a single mother running a cafe? Thomas countered. Weston's fists tightened. Don't, he warned. Do not reduce her like that. Thomas straightened, his tone cold. We have the resources to ensure the child's future. You cannot guarantee what this woman can provide. Weston felt something snap inside him. You think dragging a child away from the mother who raised her will guarantee her future? Eleanor stepped in gently, masking pressure with softness. We're only talking about exploring options, she said. Temporary custody arrangements, supervised transitions. It's about ensuring she grows up with privilege, opportunity. She already has love, Weston cut in. She doesn't need to be rescued. Thomas's next words landed like a strike. Custody might be necessary. Weston felt his pulse spike. You touch that woman or her child with any legal threat, he said, voice shaking with fury, and you will lose me. The room fell silent, but the pressure had begun. I won't let you do this, Weston said, voice deepening, steadying. Thomas scoffed. You don't have the authority to stop. I'm not the boy I used to be, Weston interrupted. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His tone carried conviction born from 5 years of regret and 6 days of life-changing clarity. Imani raised our daughter alone, he continued. She did the hard work. She carried the weight I dropped. She built a home for Sienna without help, without support, without excuses. Eleanor tried to speak, but Weston held up a hand. No. You're going to listen. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to them this way. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for favors. She didn't chase me down to announce a pregnancy. She didn't weaponize the truth. She protected herself. She protected our child. His breath hitched. She has earned respect. Thomas leaned back, unimpressed. And what about you, Weston? Where were you? Weston's voice cracked. Failing, he whispered. Failing them both. Eleanor's expression softened. Not with acceptance, only with discomfort. I am done living by your rules, Weston said. If you can't accept Imani and Sienna, that is your issue, not theirs, not mine. Caroline watched quietly, surprised by the shift in him. You will not contact attorneys, Weston added. You will not investigate her. You will not show up at her cafe. You will not use my daughter's existence as leverage. Thomas's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake. No, Weston said firmly. I'm finally doing something right. And for the first time in his life, he defended someone not because it was expected of him, but because his heart demanded it. Eleanor stood, smoothing her dress with slow, controlled motions. A child of our name belongs with us, she said. Her tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried decades of influence, expectation, and entitlement. Weston stared at her, the words landing like ice. She belongs with her mother, he replied. She belongs with both of her parents, Eleanor corrected. And if the mother chooses to stand in the way— Weston stepped forward. Don't finish that sentence. Eleanor hesitated only a moment before continuing anyway. We will do what we must to ensure the child's future. Weston felt rage and fear collide inside him. You will not touch Sienna, he said. You will not go near Imani. I will not allow it. This isn't your decision alone, Thomas added. Yes, Weston said firmly. It is. The room thickened with tension, layers of old control clashing with a man who finally learned to stand on his own. Eleanor's gaze sharpened. You are choosing them over your family. I'm choosing what's right, Weston answered. You'll regret this, Thomas warned. No, Weston said, backing away. I regret what I've already done. I won't add to it. He left the estate with his heart pounding, the cold night air biting at his skin. But beneath the fear, beneath the anger, beneath the uncertainty, one truth grounded him. He would protect Imani and Sienna, even if he had to fight the people who raised him, and the tension now spreading through the Hale family was only the beginning. The days that followed the confrontation at the Hale estate brought something new into Weston's life, a determination he never felt before. He arrived at Honeywell Eats every afternoon, never late, never distracted. His phone stayed in his pocket. His laptop remained closed. His full attention went to Sienna, and to the rhythm forming between him and Imani. Respect began quietly. It showed itself in the way Weston always asked Imani before introducing something new into Sienna's routine. It showed when he offered help without forcing his presence. It showed when he listened, really listened, to the concerns she voiced as a mother. One afternoon, after Sienna finished her reading practice, Weston helped wipe down the tables despite wearing a crisp shirt. "You don't have to do that," Imani murmured. He glanced up. "I want to. This is your place. You've built something incredible here. I'm just trying to share the load." She held his gaze longer than she intended. Something gentle flickered there, something she hadn't let herself feel since before Sienna was even born. Respect also surfaced in smaller moments, how he stepped aside to let her lead with decisions, how he never questioned her judgment, how he acknowledged every effort she made raising their daughter. He didn't try to overshadow her. He didn't try to take credit. He didn't try to assert control. Instead, he mirrored her pace. He cherished her insight. He honored the world she built. Imani felt it. Every day, she felt it. She didn't say so, but her heart noticed. And respect, once planted, quietly began to grow roots between them. Laughter was something Imani hadn't shared with Weston in years, not since the early days when they were young and hopeful. But slowly, gently, the sound returned. It happened during a slow afternoon at the cafe. Weston was helping Sienna draw a family portrait, her idea, and the result was endearingly chaotic. Sienna had drawn herself with huge curls, Weston with exaggerated dimples, and Imani with a crown. "A crown?" Weston chuckled. "Are you saying Mommy's the queen?" "Yes," Sienna replied confidently. Imani tried to hide her smile, but failed. "Why do I have such big hair?" Weston asked, pointing at his cartoon version. "Because you don't sit still when you think," Sienna replied matter-of-factly. Imani burst out laughing. It was sudden, bright, warm, the kind of laugh that carried memory and healing at the same time. She covered her mouth, but the sound had already escaped. Weston's chest tightened, not in pain, but in something else, something hopeful, something he remembered from long ago. "I've missed that sound," he said softly. Imani froze, the smile fading slightly, not in discomfort, but in caution. She cleared her throat. "She's very observant." "Not just her," Weston murmured. The moment hung in the air, sweet, careful, familiar. Sienna, oblivious, continued coloring. But something shifted inside Imani. Shared laughter had cracked a door she thought was sealed tight. She didn't open it fully, but she didn't close it either. Imani never thought co-parenting with Weston would feel natural, but somehow it did. They fell into a rhythm, a steady, respectful, considerate rhythm. Weston handled the school pickups on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Imani covered mornings. They communicated calmly through text, updates, reminders, questions. Not once did Weston overstep. Not once did he dismiss her judgment. Not once did he make decisions without checking with her first. One morning, Sienna woke up grumpy. She didn't want to go to school. She didn't want to eat. She didn't want to get dressed. Imani texted Weston, "Rough start today. She's upset and says she misses you." He replied, "I can stop by the cafe before she goes in. 5 minutes of comfort might help her day start better. Only if you approve." Imani paused, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Yes, that would help." He arrived within 10 minutes. Sienna's face brightened the second she saw him. "Weston!" He knelt and opened his arms. She ran straight into them. "I missed you," she said quietly. "I missed you too," he whispered. Watching them, Imani felt something melt inside her. Not because she needed Weston back, not yet, but because seeing him love their daughter with such intention soothed a wound she didn't realize was still open. CO Parenting Harmony wasn't just about schedules. It was about trust in progress. It was about seeing effort, not excuses. It was about both parents putting their child's heart first. And Weston was doing that, every single day. Sienna didn't know she was healing two adults. She only knew she loved spending time with both of them. She loved when they stood close enough for her to hold both their hands. She loved when they laughed at something she said. She loved being the reason they shared a smile. One Saturday, Weston took Imani and Sienna to the park, a simple outing. But the first time they'd all been together outside the cafe. Sienna ran toward the swings, calling, "Push me!" Both adults moved at the same time. Imani paused. Weston stepped back. "You go ahead," he said gently. "No," Imani replied. "You should." They looked at each other, a mutual understanding passing between them. Weston pushed the swing gently, letting Sienna's laughter spill into the warm afternoon air. Imani stood nearby, arms crossed, not in defensiveness, but in quiet contentment. As Sienna swung higher, she yelled, "Mommy, come stand next to him." Imani blinked. Sienna repeated, louder, "Come stand next to Weston. It feels like a family." Imani's breath caught. Weston froze. The words were innocent, but their impact was profound. Imani walked over, keeping a respectful distance, but enough that Sienna smiled proudly. "See?" Sienna said. "I told you." Weston glanced sideways at Imani, grateful but cautious. Imani didn't look at him, but her heart understood what her daughter was doing. Sienna was bridging a gap neither adult knew how to cross alone. Sienna's innocence did what apologies couldn't. It softened everything. She never forced conversations. She never asked heavy questions twice. She simply loved, openly, easily. One evening she drew another picture, 3 stick figures holding hands. The smallest one had curls. The middle one had a crown. The tallest one had a tiny dot at the cheek. Imani saw it. Her heart trembled. "That's us," Sienna said proudly. "We're a team." Imani swallowed hard. Weston ran a thumb over the paper in awe. Sienna added a sun in the corner. "A happy sun because I have both of you now." Imani blinked fast, emotions rising. Weston gently placed his hand over Sienna's head. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" the child asked. "For bringing everyone together," he whispered. Imani turned away, but only slightly, just enough to hide a tear that slipped free. Sienna didn't know heartbreak. She didn't know the weight of the past. She only knew love. And love, pure, innocent love, began stitching 2 wounded adults back together. Not romantically, not yet, but spiritually, emotionally, gently. It happened on a quiet evening after closing. Weston stayed behind to help Imani stack chairs, a routine that had become familiar and strangely comforting. They worked side by side. Silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was warm, safe. After placing the last chair down, Imani stretched her back and sighed softly. "Long day?" Weston asked. "Always," she replied with a tired smile. He watched her for a moment, really watched her. The strength in her posture, the gentleness in her movements, the way she always put others before herself. "Imani," he began, voice low. She looked up, sensing the shift instantly. "What is it?" He stepped closer, not too close, just enough for honesty. "I need to say something." Her chest tightened. "I know I can't fix the past," he said. "I know I hurt you. I know I have a long way to go. But being around you again, it feels like breathing after years of holding my breath." Imani froze. Her heart thudded once, heavy. Weston continued, voice trembling with sincerity. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm not pushing for anything. I just want you to know that I never stopped caring. Not really." Imani's lips parted slightly. A confession hovered, gentle, fragile, real. But she stepped back, placing a hand on the counter to steady herself. "Weston," she whispered. "Please don't." "Not right now." He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to." "I know," she interrupted softly. "I know, but I can't go there. Not yet." Her voice trembled, not with anger, but fear. "I've rebuilt too much," she continued. "If I fall again, I'm not just falling alone. Sienna falls with me." Weston nodded slowly, understanding sinking deep. "I won't push," he whispered. "I promise." Imani exhaled shakily. "Thank you." The moment settled, intense but unfinished. They stood there, neither moving closer, neither pulling away entirely. A near confession, a paused heart, a slow burn flame ignited, but kept under careful control. And that is where the tension stayed, gentle, quiet, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Weston entered his office early Monday morning, expecting a normal start to the week. The skyline shimmered outside the windows of Hale and Company. Investments. His assistant, Daniel, walked toward him, holding a thick envelope. "It came from your family's attorney," Daniel said cautiously. Marked urgent. Weston took it, brow tightening. He hadn't spoken to his parents since the argument at the estate. He assumed they were giving him space. He was wrong. He opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the first page. The words slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. Petition for custody consideration, minor child, Sienna Wells. His stomach dropped. His pulse hammered. His vision sharpened into cold clarity. They filed behind his back. After he told them not to. After he warned them to stop. He flipped through the pages. Legal arguments twisted to paint Imani as inadequate. A. Financial risk. A limited provider. Someone unable to match the Hale lifestyle. His jaw clenched so tightly, he felt the pressure in his teeth. They used his wealth, his name, his silence, all to attack the mother of his child. He slammed the file shut, breath unsteady. Daniel stepped back, startled. "Weston, what is it?" "I need a moment," Weston said sharply. He walked into his private office, locking the door behind him. He pressed both palms against the desk, head bowed. His parents didn't just cross a line, they demolished it. He told them not to interfere. He told them to stay away. He told them Sienna was not to be touched, but they didn't listen. And now, he held evidence of their betrayal in his hands. A tremor rolled through him. His heart felt like it was tearing open. For the first time in his life, Weston Hale, who sat in rooms with billionaires, outmaneuvered competitors, led markets, felt genuine fear, not for himself, for his daughter, Imani, for the fragile, healing connection he was building. His parents tried to end it before it began, and they had no idea what storm they had unleashed. Weston reread every page, not to understand, he already did, but because his mind refused to accept that the people who raised him were capable of this. He sat back slowly, chest tight, breath heavy. "They didn't even tell me," he whispered. "They didn't call. They didn't warn him. They didn't discuss anything. They acted behind closed doors, confident their influence would overpower him, confident they could shape Sienna's future the way they shaped his entire childhood." He thought about Imani, her smile, her strength, the way she raised their daughter with dignity instead of entitlement. He thought about her late nights, her tears, her sacrifices. And now, his family wanted to take everything she built, not because they loved Sienna, not because they believed they could offer better, but because power made them feel entitled. A shaky breath escaped him. "I should have expected this," he whispered. "I should have known," but he didn't, because part of him still wanted to believe his parents were capable of change. He lifted the custody petition again. One sentence made his blood run cold. It would be in the child's best interest to transition from her current environment. Her current environment? A home filled with love? A cafe built from sweat and sacrifice? A mother who showed up every single day? He slammed the packet onto the table. "They're attacking her life," he said. "They're attacking her mother." His heartbeat quickened. His hands shook. Anger surged through him. Not reckless anger, but focused, protective anger. He straightened slowly. If this was the road his parents chose, then they were about to face a version of Weston they had never met. Imani was wiping tables at Honeywell Eats when Weston walked in without warning. One look at his face and her grip on the cloth faltered. "Weston?" she asked. "What happened?" He held a folder in his hand. A heavy folder, a dangerous folder. He didn't speak. He placed it on the counter. Imani opened it slowly. The first sentence froze her blood. She read further. Her hands began to shake. Her knees weakened. The room tilted slightly as she gripped the counter for support. "They're trying to take her," she whispered. "They're trying to take my baby." Her breathing sped up, shallow and panicked. She pressed a hand to her chest as if trying to hold herself together. Weston stepped closer. "Imani, listen." "No." Her voice broke. "No, no, no. This can't be happening. I did everything right. I raised her. I protected her. I gave her everything I had. They can't just—" She couldn't finish. Her voice collapsed into a sob she didn't see coming. Her entire body trembled. Weston reached for her instinctively. "Imani." "No," she cried, stepping back. "You don't understand. This is my worst fear, my absolute worst fear. She wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. I always knew something like this could happen. Not because of you, but because of them. Because of the power they have. Because of the world they live in. Because of what they think is right. She felt the air leave her lungs. I can't lose her, she whispered brokenly. I can't lose my little girl. Weston closed the distance slowly, carefully. He didn't touch her. He didn't force comfort. He simply stood close enough that she could feel stability beside her. I'm going to fix this, he said quietly. I won't let them win. Her tears kept falling. Don't say that unless you mean it, she whispered. His voice steadied. I mean every word. Imani sank into one of the cafe chairs, shoulders trembling. Weston sat across from her, giving her space but refusing to look away. She held the petition in her hands, eyes glassy with disbelief. They want to take her away from me, she whispered. After everything I've done, after every night I held her, after every morning I woke up praying she'd never feel abandoned, they want to steal the only thing in this world that has kept me going. Weston's heart cracked. Imani, she shook her head, voice trembling. I knew your world was different, Weston. I knew your family had expectations. But I never thought. She choked. I never thought they would try to erase me. Her voice softened into a painful whisper. They don't even know her. They don't care about her. They only care about control. A sob escaped her chest. I fought so hard, she said. Every day, every year, I've fought to keep her safe, to give her a home, to give her joy. And now, her voice broke again. Now your family wants to tear her from everything she knows. Weston clenched his fists. I swear to you, he said, leaning forward. They will not win. Imani looked up, vulnerable, broken, terrified. Promise me, she whispered. Promise me she'll be safe. Weston felt the weight of her fear settle into his bones. I promise, he said. On my life. Imani closed her eyes. And for the first time since he returned, she let herself break in front of him. Weston left the cafe that evening with a fire inside him that overshadowed any ambition he had ever felt. He drove straight to the Hale estate. He didn't knock. He walked into the living room, his footsteps sharp and decisive. His parents looked up, startled. Thomas stood slowly. Eleanor straightened, bracing herself. Weston held the custody petition in his hand and tossed it onto the table with force. You went behind my back. Eleanor lifted her chin. We took the initiative you refused to take. You betrayed me, he said, voice shaking. Thomas stepped forward. We protected you. No, Weston snapped. You tried to control me. You tried to control my daughter. You tried to control her mother. He shook his head slowly, fury rising. You crossed every line I gave you. Eleanor's voice sharpened. We acted for the child's well-being. Stop calling her the child, Weston growled. Her name is Sienna. Silence. He took another step forward. You have no idea what she's like. You have no idea how gentle she is, how bright, how curious, how loving. You don't know her. You don't deserve to speak about what's best for her. Thomas recovered. You're emotional. You're right, Weston shouted. I am. He stepped closer, eyes fierce. And here is something you need to understand clearly. I will burn every bridge before I let you take my family. Eleanor paled. Thomas stiffened. Caroline, standing in the doorway, gasped softly. Weston's voice steadied, low and lethal. If you pursue this custody case, you lose me. Permanently. His mother blinked. You don't mean that? I do, he said without hesitation. Try me. Then he turned his back on them, for the first time in his life, and walked out the door. The next morning, Weston walked into the headquarters of Hale and Company and requested a private meeting with the board. They didn't expect what came next. I'm stepping away temporarily, Weston announced. Effective immediately. The room erupted in questions. You're the face of the firm. We have deals lined up. This will impact market confidence. What's happening? Weston lifted a hand, silencing them. My daughter needs me, he said simply. The room fell quiet. I will not allow my parents to weaponize their influence against her mother. I refuse to let business be used as leverage. But Weston, one board member said, your position here, your family. My family, Weston interrupted firmly, is Imani and Sienna. A hush swept across the room. We can appoint an interim lead, Weston continued. I'll remain available for guidance, but I will not sacrifice the well-being of my daughter for this company. They had never heard him speak like this. Not with defiance, not with conviction, not with a heart louder than wealth. You're willing to risk your legacy? Someone asked. Weston shook his head slowly. No, I'm finally protecting it. He walked out of the conference room, leaving the board in stunned silence. Outside, the cold air hit him. He inhaled deeply. For the first time in years, the air felt clean. He wasn't walking toward power. He wasn't walking toward legacy. He was walking toward love, toward responsibility, toward fatherhood, toward Imani, toward a life not built on fear, but on truth. The news reached Imani 2 days later. She was preparing a tray of blueberry muffins when the cafe door opened and Weston stepped inside, not with the confidence of a man who owned a company, but with the calm humility of someone who had just realigned his entire life. He removed his coat, folded it neatly over his arm, and approached her with timid steadiness. "We need to talk," he said softly. Imani wiped her hands on her apron. "What happened?" Weston took a breath. "I stepped away from the company." Her shoulders stiffened. "You... what?" "I told the board I'm taking a leave of absence," he continued. "I can't protect Sienna if my parents can use my position against her. I needed to separate myself from their influence." Imani stared at him, stunned. "You stepped away from everything you built?" "Yes, and you did that because she's my daughter," he said firmly. "And because you're the mother of my child. The two of you matter more to me than any business ever could." Imani's breath caught. This wasn't a gesture. This wasn't performance. This was sacrifice, real, costly, profound. "Weston, that company is your world," she whispered. "No," he corrected gently. "It was my world." "It isn't anymore." Imani felt something shift inside her, something warm, something overwhelming, something she had fought against for years. Her eyes softened, even as she tried to steady her voice. "That's a huge decision." "It was the only one that made sense," he replied. She wasn't expecting the weight of those words. She wasn't expecting the sincerity behind them. And for the first time since Weston walked back into her life, Imani felt the wall around her heart begin to truly crack. That evening, after Sienna had left for a sleepover with her cousins, the cafe felt unusually quiet. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the room as Imani wiped down the counter. Weston stayed behind to help without being asked, another small gesture that carried weight. Imani watched him from the corner of her eye. He was different. He wasn't trying to rewrite the past. He wasn't trying to force a future. He was simply here. Present. Intentional. She cleared her throat. "You gave up a lot," she said carefully. Weston paused mid-wipe. It wasn't giving up. It was choosing correctly. Imani's heart tightened. "Why now?" she asked. Her voice wasn't accusing, just curious. "Because I spent years chasing success," he said, "and still felt empty. But spending one afternoon with our daughter filled parts of me I didn't know were missing." Imani exhaled slowly. "And what about me?" she whispered. He met her eyes without hesitation. "You were the best part of my life," he said softly. "I just didn't understand it then, but I do now." Imani swallowed hard. Her walls, those carefully layered defenses, began to crack under the weight of everything he had become. A man willing to face his mistakes. A man willing to fight his own family. A man willing to step away from power. A man willing to show up consistently. A man willing to choose love over legacy. She looked down at her hands, the edges of her voice trembling. "Weston, I don't want to be hurt again." "You won't be," he said quietly. "Not by me. Not anymore." Her eyes glossed, and the wall fell. Not with drama, not with a declaration, but with a simple, trembling exhale, and the realization that she finally trusted him again. It happened gently, without rush, without pressure. Days later, Weston arrived early to help Imani open the cafe. It was still dark outside, only streetlights illuminating the quiet Richmond block. He held the door for her, laughing softly when her hair got caught in the cold breeze. "You should wear a hat," he teased. "And ruin my curls?" She joked back. For the first time in a long time, their banter felt natural, light, familiar, warm. Inside, the cafe was dim and peaceful. Imani went to turn on the lights, but Weston touched her arm. "Wait." She looked back. He walked to the counter, turned on only the small lamp, filling the room with a soft glow. "This lighting is nicer," he said shyly. She smiled, despite herself. They stood there, two people with history deep enough to hurt and strong enough to survive. Weston stepped closer. Not too close, just close enough for honesty. "Imani," he whispered. "I want to say something, but only if you're ready." She felt her heart thump. "I'm listening." He reached out, gently brushing a curl that had fallen near her cheek. His touch was soft, careful, reverent. "I never stopped caring about you," he said, "even when I tried to convince myself I had." Her breath caught. "I know we can't erase the past," he continued, "but I want to build something better now, something real, something steady." Imani didn't pull away. Her walls weren't gone, but they were no longer barricades. "Weston," she whispered. He waited. No pressure, no expectation, just presence. She placed her hand over his. A simple touch, a gentle start, a quiet yes. That was their first romantic reconnection. Not a kiss, not a confession, but the moment two hearts decided to try again. Slowly, carefully, and with all the tenderness this time deserved. The next evening, Weston offered to help close again. Imani accepted more easily now, comfort replacing caution. He swept the floor. She stacked the chairs. They moved in sync, as though time had quietly threaded them back together. When they finished, Imani sat at one of the small tables, rubbing her shoulders. Long days took a toll. Weston noticed immediately. "You okay?" he asked, concern threaded through his voice. "Just tired," she admitted. Without speaking, he walked behind her and hesitated. "Can I?" he asked gently. She nodded. He placed his hands on her shoulders, not firmly, not suggestively, just enough pressure to loosen the tension she carried. Imani exhaled slowly. His touch wasn't claiming. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't intense. It was warm, supportive, human. And for the first time since their breakup, she allowed herself to lean back, to let someone else hold a piece of her weight. "I needed this," she whispered. "I'm here," he murmured, not going anywhere. When he stopped, she turned to face him. Their faces were inches apart, not kissing, just breathing the same quiet air, sharing a moment of affection the world couldn't misinterpret. Imani held his gaze. Her eyes softened with gratitude, and something deeper. This wasn't lust. This wasn't rebound. This wasn't confusion. This was trust returning, one breath at a time. For Sienna, the change was obvious. Her world felt brighter. She noticed how Mommy smiled more often. She noticed how Weston stood closer now. She noticed how the three of them shared space with ease. One afternoon, they all sat on a blanket at the park. Sienna drew pictures while Weston and Imani watched her run around with boundless energy. At one point, she ran back and plopped herself down between them. "Are we going to be a family now?" she asked suddenly. Imani inhaled sharply. Weston blinked. Sienna looked between them, eyes full of hope. "I mean, we do stuff together, we eat together, we laugh. That's a family, right?" Imani's voice softened. "We are a family, baby, just a growing one." Sienna grinned wide. "So can Weston come to my school day next week, the parents' picnic?" Imani hesitated. Weston didn't. "I'd love to," he said gently. "If your mom agrees." Imani looked at him. His expression was patient, respectful, hopeful. "Yes," she said quietly. "You can come." Sienna threw her arms up in triumph. "This is going to be the best picnic ever." Imani laughed, the sound light and unburdened. Weston watched her, warmth blooming inside his chest. Sienna had given them something neither could create alone. A reason to try again, a reason to hope, a reason to believe in second chances. That evening, as Weston walked Imani and Sienna to their car, Sienna slipped, her hands into each of theirs, left hand in Imani's, right hand in Weston's. The three of them walked in a perfect line. Imani looked down. Her heart swelled unexpectedly. Weston looked at their hands and emotion tightened his throat. When they reached the car, Sienna tugged both adults closer. "Group hug," she declared. Imani blinked. Weston froze. Sienna pulled them together anyway. And suddenly, the three of them were wrapped in a warm, clumsy, perfect embrace. Sienna giggled. Weston exhaled shakily. Imani closed her eyes, letting herself feel it. When the hug ended, Sienna said softly, "This feels right." Imani's eyes misted. Weston's chest ached with love. And in that small moment, under the soft Richmond streetlight, a truth settled over all of them. They weren't just trying to rebuild a connection. They were becoming a family. Slowly, gently, deliberately. And this time, they were building it on love, not fear. The Hale Foundation Gala was the largest event of the season. Ballroom lights, glowing, cameras flashing, board members mingling in polished tuxedos. Weston arrived early, not for celebration, but for the confrontation he had planned. His parents spotted him from across the room. Thomas lifted his chin, displeased. Eleanor stiffened, bracing herself. But Weston didn't walk alone. He walked in with Imani by his side. Her dress was simple but elegant, soft navy fabric, curls pinned loosely, confidence radiating with each step. She wasn't there for glamour. She was there because Weston asked her to stand beside him for one moment of truth. Conversations around them paused. Eyes widened. Whispers started. Weston didn't care. He stopped directly in front of his parents. Thomas spoke first. "You brought her here? To this event?" "Yes," Weston replied calmly. "Because I'm done letting you pretend she's not important." Eleanor's voice trembled. "This is not the place." "It's exactly the place," Weston interrupted. "You made this a public issue when you filed for custody behind my back. I'm going to end it publicly." The room quieted as guests subtly turned to watch. Weston continued, voice steady but powerful. "You will withdraw the custody petition. Tonight." Thomas scoffed. "Or what?" Weston stepped forward. "Or you lose me, permanently, and you lose any chance of knowing your granddaughter." Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Eleanor's voice shook. "Weston, this is our legacy." "No," he said sharply. "Sienna is my legacy." Imani watched silently, heart pounding, overwhelmed by how fiercely he defended their daughter. Weston looked around the ballroom, meeting the eyes of every person listening. "I'm done letting fear guide me. I'm done letting power silence what's right. I'm choosing my daughter. I'm choosing the woman who raised her with strength and love, and I will protect them with everything I am." The room fell silent. Thomas's jaw tightened. Eleanor blinked rapidly, shaken. But they understood. They had lost their power over him, and the world had witnessed it. Thomas stepped closer, lowering his voice but failing to hide his anger. "You are humiliating us." Weston met his stare directly. "No. You humiliated yourselves when you tried to take a child who was never neglected, never unsafe, never unloved." His mother swallowed hard, tears threatening. "We only wanted—" "You wanted control," Weston said, "not family." "Control?" Eleanor looked down, finally unable to defend herself. Weston continued, "Every decision you made was about image, about legacy, about status. Not once did you consider the actual child at the center of this. And you," he added, turning to Thomas, "were willing to tear apart a home just to maintain your influence." Thomas leaned closer. "You're making a mistake siding with that woman." Weston's expression hardened. "She has a name, and she's the mother of my child, and she is 10 times the parent either of you ever were." Imani's breath caught. The guest nearest them froze, stunned. Thomas opened his mouth to argue, but Eleanor touched his arm, shaking her head. "Stop," she whispered. "We've lost." Weston stared at them, chest rising and falling. "You're right," he said. "You did." Then he reached for Imani's hand, not for show, not for defiance, but out of genuine connection. This time, she didn't pull away. As the musicians began playing again, Weston gently led Imani to the center of the ballroom floor. Heads turned. Conversations hushed again. He turned to her slowly. "Imani," he murmured, "you don't have to stay. This night wasn't meant to drag you into the spotlight." She looked up at him, eyes soft, voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't drag me. You stood for me." He swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. "Then let me do this fully." She frowned slightly. "Do what?" He stepped back just enough that everyone watching could see. Then, with a steady breath, he reached for her hand and lifted it gently. "This is the woman I choose," he said clearly. Not quietly, not in secret, not behind closed doors. A wave of whispers filled the ballroom. He continued, "She is the mother of my child, the heart of our family, and the person I love." Imani froze. Her lips parted. Her breath caught. Her chest tightened. He had never said it out loud, not in their young love, not in their heartbreak, not until now. "Weston," she whispered. "You don't have to answer," he added quickly. "I don't expect anything. I just want to love you right this time." Openly and without fear. Her eyes filled, and suddenly, the years of pain, fear, walls, and hesitation all began to lift. Not completely, not instantly, but visibly. She squeezed his hand. "I see you," she said softly. "And I'm choosing to believe in this." That was enough. For now, it was everything. The ballroom faded around them. The light softened. The music swelled. The whispers blurred. Imani stepped closer, slow, cautious, intentional. "Weston," she said gently, "you fought for us today." He shook his head. "I fought for what's right." She touched his chest lightly. "And that is why I'm here." Their eyes held each other's for several long seconds, not as ex-lovers, not as Kyo parents, but as two people who had walked through fire, separately, painfully, and somehow found their way back toward the same path. Weston guided her into a slow dance. Her hand rested softly on his shoulder. His hand held hers with careful tenderness. This wasn't passionate or dramatic. This was healing. Two hearts learning to beat near each other again. A soft smile curved on Imani's lips. "You're different now," she whispered. "So are you," he replied. Only they existed in that moment. The world outside could wait. The next morning, Weston arrived at Honeywell Eats early. The sun was barely rising, casting a warm glow through the cafe windows. Imani unlocked the door, surprised. "You're early," she smiled softly. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. Sienna ran inside moments later, carrying a small backpack and excitement in her steps. "Weston," she giggled, running toward him. He knelt, arms wide. But today, something different happened. She wrapped her arms around his neck tightly, then whispered, completely unprompted, "Daddy." Weston froze. Every muscle in his body stilled. His breath caught. His heart pounded. His eyes prickled. He pulled back slightly, looking at her. What did you say?" he asked softly. Sienna smiled, innocent and proud. "Daddy. Mommy said you're my dad, and I like calling you that now." Imani gasped quietly behind them, hand lifting to her mouth. Weston's throat tightened until speaking felt impossible. But he managed. "Say it again." Sienna laughed. "Daddy." A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. He hugged her again, holding her like something precious returning home. Imani wiped her eyes discreetly, overwhelmed. This moment, this single word, healed something in all three of them. Sienna pulled back, still grinning. "Daddy, can you come to my school lunch today?" He blinked. A new warmth filled his chest. "Yes," he whispered. "Today and every day you want me there." She clapped her hands. "I'll save you a cookie." He laughed, still emotional. Imani stepped closer, voice soft, eyes full. "She chose that on her own," she murmured. "I didn't push it. I didn't suggest it." "I know," he said. "That's what makes it mean everything." Imani placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You've earned her trust," she said. "And yours?" he whispered. She hesitated, not out of fear, but sincerity. "You're earning it," she said. "More every day." He nodded slowly. No pressure, no rushing, no forcing a future, just growing into one naturally. Sienna took both their hands. "Let's go eat breakfast," she announced proudly. Together, and for the first time, the simple act of walking toward a cafe table felt like the beginning of a new life. Not broken, not patched, whole. Weeks passed. The custody petition was withdrawn quietly. Thomas and Eleanor retreated, privately shaken by the force of Weston's conviction. Honeywell Eats thrived. Sienna flourished. Imani breathed easier. And Weston, he rebuilt his life intentionally, not ambitiously. He didn't rush back to corporate power. He didn't allow old patterns to return. He chose presence over prestige, love over pressure, meaning over legacy. Together, they formed a rhythm that finally felt like home. Dinner nights, park days, homework help, soft touches on the shoulder, shared glances full of new understanding. Not perfect, but real. "Bestie." This story carries powerful lessons. A home built on fear can't outlast a home built on love. A parent is defined by presence, not wealth. Healing begins when someone chooses you with intention, not convenience. A woman who rebuilds herself deserves a partner who matches her strength. Second chances aren't about erasing the past. They're about writing a better future. Imani learned that her worth was never tied to abandonment. Weston learned that courage isn't silence. It's standing for the people who matter. Sienna learned that love can grow stronger after truth is spoken. Families aren't perfect. They're built through effort, honesty, and bravery. And this family? They chose each other, fully, openly, permanently. Before you go, bestie, I want to speak straight to your heart. If this story moved you, if you felt a moment that made you pause, if you rooted for Imani, Weston, and little Sienna, please like this video. It helps the story reach someone else who may need it. Drop a comment. What was your biggest takeaway from today's story? And subscribe if you love modern American love stories that teach, uplift, and touch the heart. We're building a beautiful storytelling family here, and you're part of it. As the sun set over Richmond one quiet evening, Sienna rested her head on Weston's shoulder while Imani leaned into his other side. A complete picture, a healed circle, a future finally free of fear. And in that peaceful moment, it became clear. Sometimes life takes you the long way around, just to bring you exactly where you were meant to be. Love wins when people choose it courageously. Always.